is not, like, has been radically different, right? I'm trying to think about how to phrase this the best way, because yeah, lines do get blurred. It's a complicated subject. Um, there's a difference between European and white culture. To say European culture is inherently white is not necessarily true. Black culture, I wouldn't say like black culture is a thing in Africa necessarily. Black culture is a unique American experience because of, you know, ginormous events that generally impacted the black populace in the United States. Those being slavery, segregation, and even now our massive prison incarceration system. So these main three events have like culminated to create what we know as a black culture, right? The idea of rap, most, at least from what I've read, maybe I'm wrong if you want to correct me, but rap kind of came as a form of like kind of dissentment towards the like current system that was like oppressing like black minorities, and a lot of those songs, at least originally when they started, to go back to kind of arguing about the systems and powers or struggles that a lot of black kids or black people had to face growing up with that said sort of racism, you know. Classical music didn't come from from a white person's experience of being white, right? Or a European's, like, I guess, like oppression of being European. Does that make sense? I did reach my sub goal. You got this, Pixie. You're Puerto Rican, but Puerto Rican. Yeah, this is, it's, you call me Nazi furry midget porn. Just any degenerate thing you can think of, that's what I'm basically you know? So I can't blame this shit, on anybody but me and my hideous Nazi porn addiction of furries. Ruder, yeah. Whiteness used to exclude Polish or Irish Polish or Irish or Italian immigrants, for example. Yep. You think Onizian trying to act crazy to get a mentally incompetent verdict? No, I think he's just a narcissistic idiot. I don't think that would be grounds for like insanity. I just legit think he's a narcissistic sociopath who thinks he's above the law. My heart. This was a fucking roller coaster of emotions with my stream acting like a little bitch. Yeah, you can take off follower mode. Maybe not. Certain topics on here have a minefield, my goodness. Well, yeah, JPEX, it's a really complicated subject. Is upper American middle class white culture generally asking, not contesting? No, the whole concept of white culture is just not like the whole concept of white is just such a subjective thing in general that it's really hard for me to say, oh, white culture does exist in that sense. I would say no, like not necessarily, because like then with that idea, like poor whites, what would that make of poor whites? Would they not be participating in like white culture? That's like a class thing, not a culture thing. But you can argue that there's a culture within class. Wow, that's really complicated, but let me explain. So you can argue that like rich people have a different set of mannerisms than poor people, right? You can argue that there's a subculture in there. That a person who's used to having abundant amounts of money are gonna act differently than a person who's used to not having money, you know? That's an argument to be made there about subcultures. But to relate this like only to like, oh, this is only a white person thing is not necessarily true. You can say more rich people tend to be white because we have a history of oppressing black people and stopping them from reaching like their full economic potential. But the culture that like evolved from that, or the subculture, has to do a lot freaking more with, you know, having money than the color of the skin, if that makes any sense. Yeah, no, it is very subjective. I completely agree with you. Those bots started following you, so they might show up and then follower mode is off. I don't know. I think it was like some sort of program a person put in to fuck with me. Yeah. I think whiteness is merely framed as not the other. So the one drop rule is if you're white, if you're not black, because it's especially explicitly a racist concept. One thing is for the children, a lot of that is revisionism. What do you mean by revisionism? White skin color used to be unique to Europe, though. On the same latitudes in America, the natives had a darker pigment, and to east, the Asians also had a darker pigment. What are you talking about? Like, there's definitely white, like, okay, so most people are like, oh no, like, Asians, yellow skin, whatever, like, when you, whiteness has also been something, like, coveted in Asian countries, way before Western imperialism, right? So, I don't know what your argument there is exactly, buddy. And it's not like these, I guess, like, these forms of culture, or not these forms of culture, but that these, like, for example, like your philosophy argument, it's not like these ideas came inherently because the people were white, right? It wasn't, oh, I am white, so now I'm going to think that way. Their race didn't really necessarily have to do with the type of, like, philosophy, I guess that came up from it. I guess their ethnicity, right? They're European, so they're used to European ideas. But most philosophers, for example, or like most musicians, are exposed to, you know, global, or at least like outside of their area people. Does that make sense? Am I making sense right now? It's okay if you say no. Yeah, rap did come from America. Race is a very binary thing. There's a norm and the other. Technically speaking, European in general was quite oppressed under the Christian church. I agree. The Christian church was super duper oppressive. Can you say that for certain? You're attributing culture to trauma, essentially. Yeah, culture can definitely be an outcome from trauma. If you want to make the distinction that black culture arose from black suffering and white culture doesn't exist because of the absence, then you kind of paint the rest of the world with an interesting brush. Does Middle Eastern culture exist if they suffered to attain it? I'm not just speaking about the I'm speaking about the specific United States context here, right? I'm speaking about why in the United States, like, the whole idea of white culture isn't, like, really a real thing, because the concept of white itself is